The moment you realize your marriage is unraveling isn't dramatic, it's a quiet, suffocating revelation that creeps up like a shadow. My wife Elena and I have been married for 11 years, together for 15. She's brilliant, ambitious, and captivating in a way that once made me feel like I had won life's lottery. But recently, I've been gradually descending into a shadowy emotional landscape, witnessing the disintegration of my world without comprehending its root cause. The unraveling began subtly. Elena and I both have high-pressure careers. She's in digital brand strategy, and I'm a cybersecurity architect. We've always been busy, but we managed to maintain our connection. At least I thought we did. Gradually, she started extending her work hours with increasing frequency. I'm talking 3 or 4 times a week. She'd tell me she had urgent strategy sessions or that her team was collaborating on a critical product launch. Initially, I believed her. I trusted her, even if a part of me was sensing the growing emotional chasm between us. The first signs emerged through her digital behaviors. I noticed she'd be on her phone constantly, her expression radiating a private joy, texting away. I didn't want to be that stereotypical suspicious husband, so I rationalized it was harmless, probably just work or messages from friends. But one restless night, I woke up and saw her sitting in the soft glow of her screen, smiling with an almost adolescent excitement. I lay there quietly watching her, feeling an ominous knot of uncertainty forming in my core. Would you like me to continue with this approach? The opening hook adds more immediate tension and draws the reader in more quickly, while maintaining the original narrative's emotional depth. The restaurant descended into a hurricane of silence. Every eye was locked on the scene unfolding, a tableau of betrayal painted in raw, unfiltered emotion. Elena stood there, her perfectly curated professional image crumbling like a house of cards. The man beside her, tall, with that corporate leather messenger bag slung casually over his shoulder, looked like he wanted to vanish into thin air. I walked forward, each step measured, controlled, despite the volcanic eruption brewing inside me. My surprise party, meticulously planned with Dave and Maggie, had transformed into something else entirely. A public execution of trust. "Happy birthday, Elena," I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a surgical blade. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of 15 years of shared history, of dreams we'd built together. Her face cycled through emotions faster than a computer processing complex algorithms: shock, panic, then a defiance that seemed almost rehearsed. The guy next to her shuffled uncomfortably, looking like a schoolboy caught cheating during an exam. But here's where our story takes an unexpected turn. Dave, my college friend and the most loyal person I know, suddenly stepped forward. He wasn't just going to let this moment pass silently. "I think everyone here deserves the full story," he said, pulling out a folder filled with printed screenshots and documents. Elena's confidence wavered. "These messages," Dave said, spreading the documents on the restaurant table, "show something very different from a casual friendship." His voice was calm, clinical, like a prosecutor presenting irrefutable evidence. The room held its collective breath. Family members, friends, colleagues all watched as the carefully constructed facade of Elena's life began to crumble. The corporate guy, I'd later learn his name was Marcus, tried to interrupt. "This is a private matter," he stammered, but Dave's steely gaze silenced him. Messages revealed not just an affair, but a calculated plan. Marcus wasn't just a colleague. He was part of a strategic career move. Elena had been planning for months, a potential job transfer that would require relocating, potentially without me. "You are going to leave?" I asked, my voice a mixture of disbelief and a strange, cold curiosity. Elena's legendary composure, the same charm that had drawn me to her years ago, suddenly looked fragile. Her marketing skills, her ability to spin narratives, seemed to evaporate under the harsh light of truth. Maggie, who had helped plan this surprise, stepped forward. "How long?" she asked Elena, her voice quiet but loaded with disappointment. The room waited. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Elena said nothing. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear. The expensive birthday decorations, the carefully selected wine, the meticulously arranged flowers now seemed like props in a tragic performance. My mother, who had been silent until now, spoke. 15 years, she said softly, looking at Elena with a mix of anger and profound sadness. 15 years of trust, and this is how it ends. The twist wasn't just the betrayal, it was the calculated nature of it, a professional, almost clinical dismantling of our life together. Dave's evidence suggested this wasn't just an emotional affair. It was a strategic life reorganization, career moves, potential relocations, a complete reconstruction of Elena's future, without consideration for our marriage. Marcus mumbled something about needing to leave, but no one was listening. The focus was entirely on Elena, the woman who had transformed from my partner to a stranger in mere moments. My mind raced through memories: our first date, our wedding, the dreams we'd shared, now feeling like artifacts from a museum of a life that never truly existed. The birthday party had become something else entirely, a public dissection of a marriage, a brutal revelation of hidden truths. And in that moment, surrounded by shocked faces and unspoken judgments, I realized our story was over, not with a dramatic fight, but with a cold, calculated unraveling. The birthday cake sat untouched, a perfect metaphor for our perfect illusion. I didn't care about the crowd anymore. I couldn't hold back my feelings. "Do you have any idea how much this hurts?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I've been trying to trust you, even when things didn't make sense. I've been holding on to our marriage, hoping we could fix things." I pointed around the room at the decorations, the food, the friends and family who had come to celebrate her. "This was supposed to be for you, for us. And you show up like this, with him." For a quick moment, I thought I saw something in her eyes, maybe guilt or shame. But it vanished instantly, replaced by her cold stare. Then she said something that stopped me in my tracks. "Maybe if you were half as interesting as he is, I wouldn't need to network so much," she said, her voice dripping with meanness. The words hit me like a punch. I stood there, trying to understand how the woman I'd built my life with could be so cruel. The room was totally quiet. Some people looked away, feeling uncomfortable. Others stared at Elena, a mix of shock and disgust on their faces. My mom stepped forward, looking like she wanted to say something, but I stopped her. This was my fight. "Do you realize what you're saying in front of everyone?" I whispered. I wasn't even angry anymore, just completely broken. "After everything we've been through, after everything I've done to make our marriage work, this is how you see me." She rolled her eyes. "You're always playing the victim. Maybe if you were more exciting, more ambitious, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere for something more." The room gasped. A few people winced. It was like she'd dropped a bomb, and everyone felt the explosion. I looked around at our friends and family, people who had been with us through good and bad times, and suddenly I felt weirdly calm. Everyone knew the truth now. There was no more hiding. "We're done," I said quietly. "If this is who you really are, I want nothing to do with you." For a second, she looked surprised, like she didn't expect me to stand up for myself. But she quickly put on her tough face. "Fine," she said. "Maybe I'm done too. I've been carrying you for years. It's time I find someone who actually appreciates me." I didn't even answer. I just walked out, leaving her surrounded by the people she was trying to impress. But as I left, I realized something important. She had lost everyone in that moment. Not a single person followed her. Not one friend tried to comfort her. She made her choice, and now she was alone. I didn't go home. I ended up at Dave's place, still shocked by what happened. Dave and Maggie were waiting for me. Dave opened the door before I could knock, and he just hugged me. That's when I broke down. I'm not someone who cries easily, but that night, everything came out: the pain, the anger, the hurt. Dave and Maggie just sat with me, saying nothing, just being there. Eventually, I could talk. I told them everything: how Elena looked at me like I was something annoying, how she held on to that other guy like she had already moved on. Maggie was furious. "I can't believe she did this to you," she kept saying. "No one deserves this." I fell asleep on their couch, totally exhausted. When I woke up the next morning, everything hit me again. This wasn't a bad dream. This was my new life. Elena had turned her life into a live-action reality show, broadcasting every single moment, as if her existence depended on proving something to the world, and maybe to herself. Friends bombarded me with screenshots, tagged me in group chats, even called to make sure I'd witnessed her dramatic transformation. I won't lie. There was a twisted satisfaction in watching her public meltdown. Every few days, a new photo would explode across social media. Elena always at the center, always performing. Champagne glass in hand, surrounded by young, trendy people who looked like they'd been copied and pasted from an influencer's dream. Her style had completely changed: tight dresses that screamed desperation, sky-high heels, flashy jewelry that seemed to scream, "Look at me." Her captions read like bad motivational posters. Embracing my inner goddess. Finally learning to love myself. Life is too short to settle. It was over the top, painfully transparent. Each post practically begged for attention, like a child desperate to be noticed at a family gathering. One night, Maggie sent a screenshot that took the drama to another level. Elena posed in front of a luxury car, leg dramatically stretched, wearing a skin-tight dress that looked like it cost more than our first year's rent. Beside her stood a guy who looked barely out of college: gold chain, sunglasses at night, looking like a walking music video cliché. "This is who she left you for," Maggie's text read, followed by a laughing emoji. I laughed too, but there was something hollow about it. A strange, empty feeling crept up my spine. This woman I'd once shared every intimate moment with had become a complete stranger. Her new life was a carefully curated performance, each photo meticulously designed to show how amazing she was doing. Her friends started noticing. Whispers began to spread. People who once defended her now exchanged knowing glances. Her own family began questioning her choices. Her mother texted me, heartbroken, saying she didn't recognize her daughter anymore. "She's lost herself," her mother wrote. "I don't know who this person is." The truth was painfully clear: Elena was performing her happiness. Each photo, each post was a desperate attempt to convince herself she'd made the right choice. She burned through her divorce settlement like a teenager with a credit card. 5-star restaurant dinners. Exotic vacations. Endless shopping sprees. Behind the glamorous filter, I could see the cracks. The emptiness she'd always blamed on me was still there, just painted over with expensive makeup and designer labels. Our mutual friends started asking questions. What happened to the Elena we used to know? They'd wonder. Each post seemed more desperate than the last, a public performance of a life she was trying to convince herself was real. Dave called me one evening. "Have you seen her latest post?" he asked. "It's like watching a car crash in slow motion." The most heartbreaking part? Everyone could see through it. The photos screamed one thing: a woman running from herself, hoping that if she posted enough, spent enough, partied enough, she might actually believe her own lie. But the truth always finds its way to the surface. Elena thought she was writing her freedom story. Instead, she was documenting her own unraveling. And everyone was watching. One weekend, Dave and I went out for drinks, something that had become our regular ritual since the divorce. We ended up at this quiet downtown pub, a place we used to frequent back in college when life seemed simpler and less complicated. As the night wore on, Dave got that serious look I'd come to recognize, the one that meant he had something important to share. "Jacob, I need to tell you something," he said, setting down his drink and leaning in close. I braced myself. By now I was used to hearing updates about Elena. "Go ahead," I replied, expecting another story about her social media drama. "It's about Elena," he continued, scratching the back of his neck like he was nervous about sharing the information. "I wasn't sure if I should bring it up, but I think you'll want to hear this." I nodded, motioning for him to continue. "A friend of mine saw her last week at a party," Dave said. "She was there with that younger guy, you know the type. Tall, muscular, looks like he spends more time in front of the mirror than anywhere else." And I prompted. By the end of the night, the guy was nowhere to be seen. They got into a huge fight in front of everyone, and he stormed off. I raised an eyebrow. "What was the fight about?" Dave smirked. "Money. He found out she wasn't as wealthy as she'd been pretending. When he realized she was burning through her divorce settlement with nothing left, he lost interest." The mental image was almost too perfect. Elena, who had traded stability for excitement, was now facing the consequences of her choices. "Sounds like she got exactly what she deserved," I said, shaking my head. "It's sad, really," Dave continued. "She was begging him not to leave, but he walked out anyway. Left her standing there looking like a complete fool." As the night went on, Dave shared more details that painted a clearer picture of Elena's new life. She'd been hanging around these younger, social media obsessed types, people who only cared about appearances and clout. She was desperately trying to keep up, spending money she didn't have to impress people who would drop her the second she was no longer useful. I couldn't help but laugh. It was like watching karma play out in real time. I don't even feel angry anymore, I admitted. Just relieved that it's not my problem. By the time I went home that night, I felt a strange sense of closure. Seeing her life unravel so publicly, knowing that people were starting to see the true her, it was liberating. For the first time in years, I realized I was truly free from her shadow. The weight of her betrayal finally lifted. After the divorce, I threw myself into projects that truly mattered. I took the money I'd saved and started something I'd always dreamed about, a nonprofit that helps young entrepreneurs. During my marriage to Elena, I never felt like I had the freedom to pursue this dream. Now, I had nothing holding me back. The nonprofit grew faster than I could have imagined. I spent my days meeting with young people who had big ideas but didn't have the resources to make them happen. I helped them create business plans, taught them about the industry, and shared everything I'd learned over the years. For the first time, I felt truly fulfilled. This work gave me a sense of purpose I didn't even know I was missing. As I rebuilt my life, I started meeting new people, friends who appreciated me for who I was, not what I could do for them. Dating became something casual, without the desperate urgency of my younger years. I discovered something important: I could be happy on my own. I didn't need someone else to complete me. Then one day, I got a message from Elena's mother. She had always been kind to me, even during the divorce. She asked to meet for coffee, saying she wanted to talk about something important. Curious, I agreed. When we met, she looked tired, as if the past year had aged her. She didn't waste time beating around the bush. "Jacob," she said, her voice shaking, "I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry. I didn't see what was happening with Elena. I thought she was happy, that she just needed some space. But now I see the mistake she made." I nodded, not sure what to say. Part of me felt validated, but another part just felt sad for her, for Elena, for the family torn apart by betrayal and selfishness. "I know she hurt you," her mother continued. "But I want you to know that you're still like a son to me. I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished." Those words hit me like a bomb. It was the final piece of closure I hadn't realized I needed. I thanked her, assured her there were no hard feelings, and we parted on good terms. As I walked away, I felt lighter. It was like I'd finally left the past behind. 2 years have passed since the divorce, and sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. When I look at my life now, I can hardly believe how much has changed, how much I've changed. I remember those first few months after leaving Elena, when getting out of bed felt like climbing a mountain. I barely recognized the man I was then, someone drowning in betrayal, trying to make sense of a life suddenly torn apart. But now I've built something real. After walking out of Elena's life, I poured myself into my work, my friendships, my passions. The nonprofit isn't just a business. It's my way of giving young entrepreneurs the opportunity I wish someone had given me when I was starting out. The more I invested in this project, the more I realized what I'd been missing: a true sense of purpose. Creating, supporting, uplifting, it became my way of healing. A way to reclaim parts of myself buried under years of compromises and quiet resentment. I'm not just surviving anymore, I'm living. Every morning I'd sit by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the city come to life, feeling this quiet, overwhelming sense of peace. It was my sanctuary, a place where I could breathe freely without the weight of someone else's expectations. The more I focused on building my own life, the more I realized how much I'd compromised over the years. Small things like giving up weekends to attend events she cared about, or letting go of hobbies because she didn't share my interests. Bigger things too, like shelving my dream of starting my own business because she didn't want to take the financial risk. For so long, I'd convinced myself that these sacrifices were part of being a good husband. But in the end, all they did was make me smaller, dimming my light to make room for hers. As I settled into my new life, I began meeting people who appreciated me for who I was. I found myself surrounded by friends who encouraged my ideas, who didn't try to change me or mold me into something I wasn't. These friendships felt different, deeper, more genuine. They weren't built on obligation or expectation, but on respect and understanding. I even started dating again, though cautiously and without any rush to settle down. For the first time I was learning what it meant to truly value myself, and to let others value me without feeling like I had to earn it by being enough for them. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. I was at a networking event for my nonprofit, talking with investors and young entrepreneurs, when I heard a familiar voice I never expected to hear again. I turned and saw Elena standing just a few feet away, talking to someone I recognized from our old life. She hadn't seen me yet, so I took a moment to really look at her. She was still beautiful in her polished way, but something in her eyes was different. There was a weariness about her, as if the past year had finally caught up with her. She looked thinner, almost fragile, suggesting her new life had taken more from her than she was willing to admit. Suddenly she spotted me. Her face first showed shock, then something softer, almost like regret. She politely excused herself from her conversation and walked over. "Jacob," she said quietly, "I didn't expect to see you here." "Elena," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, "it's been a while." She shifted awkwardly, looking down before meeting my eyes. "I've been hearing about what you're doing," she said, glancing around the room. "The nonprofit, the mentorship program. You're doing amazing things." "Thank you," I said with a polite smile. "It's been fulfilling. I'm really proud of the work we're doing." She hesitated, searching for words. "I didn't realize back then," she began. "I didn't see how much you were capable of." Her voice trailed off, and she looked away, embarrassed. I felt no anger, no bitterness, just a sense of distance, like looking at a stranger I once knew. "Jacob," she continued, "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. I see now that I lost something good. I'm sorry." Her words hung in the air. For a moment I felt a mix of emotions, maybe sadness, maybe relief, but mostly, I felt a sense of closure. "Thank you, Elena," I said calmly. "I appreciate that. I hope you find what you're looking for." She nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. For the first time I saw the vulnerability beneath her polished exterior. She had lost her place in my life, and she knew it. Without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. As I watched her go, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This was it, the final chapter, the last remnant of that life was now closed. In the months that followed, I continued pouring my energy into things that mattered. My nonprofit expanded into new areas, and we secured partnerships with larger organizations to fund scholarships for underprivileged youth. My investments were doing well too, letting me live comfortably and grow my ventures further. I started new hobbies: hiking, painting, things I'd always wanted to try but never made time for. I traveled to places I'd only dreamed about, learning about cultures I barely knew existed. I found a kind of freedom I didn't know I was missing, one that came from truly living life on my own terms. And slowly I let love back into my life. I met someone who understood my journey, who valued honesty and respect, who didn't try to change me or make me fit a certain mold. We took things slow, building our relationship on trust and mutual admiration. She supported my dreams, encouraged my passions, and with her, I finally felt at home. Looking back, I realized that losing Elena was the best thing that could have happened to me. It forced me to face the parts of myself I'd been ignoring, to rebuild from scratch, to create a life that was completely my own. Her betrayal had been crushing, but it became a catalyst pushing me towards something real and meaningful. I don't think about her anymore or wonder about what could have been. My life is too full now, too rich with purpose and connections to waste time thinking about what I lost. I've learned that sometimes the people we think we need are actually holding us back, and sometimes the greatest gift is the freedom to become who we're meant to be. To anyone going through something similar, my advice is simple: trust yourself. Don't let anyone make you feel smaller, and when it's time to walk away, do it proudly. Life has a way of rewarding those brave enough to let go. Living well truly is the best revenge. And as I sit here, looking out over the city from my own place, surrounded by people who genuinely care about me, I know I've won in ways Elena could never understand. Because this life, this happiness, this peace, it's mine. Fully, finally, and forever mine. For those healing from betrayal, trust your journey. Your worth isn't defined by someone else's actions, but by how you rebuild and grow. If you're struggling with a painful breakup, remember your story doesn't end with someone else's decision. It begins when you choose yourself. To anyone feeling stuck in a relationship that diminishes them, courage isn't about not being afraid, it's about moving forward despite the fear. Your life is a blank canvas. Don't let past pain prevent you from creating a masterpiece of your own design. Healing isn't linear. Some days will be hard, but every step forward is a victory. Believe in yourself. If you enjoyed this story, hit subscribe for more heartfelt tales that will touch your heart.